Ellie Benton was immersed in the romantic atmosphere of Charleston. She was preparing a dinner of freshly caught grilled amberjack with freshly picked radishes and basil, alongside southern grains and homemade fresh rolls from a recipe passed down to her by her grandmother. Her appetizer of bacon-wrapped water chestnuts was almost ready. To top it all off, she chose a wonderful bottle of 2010 Sauternes Sauvignon Blanc from Diequim from Bordeaux, France to accompany this dinner. For dessert, she had fresh strawberries and cream, which she intended to eat in bed with her husband after a romantic walk on the beach, right outside the back door of her rented cottage. It was September and a Friday, a week before their 10th wedding anniversary. She knew that her husband, Will, was organizing an amazing trip for them on a Caribbean cruise next week. It was supposed to be a surprise, but she found out about it from his best friend and business partner, Corey Parker. This included at least 2 evening horseback rides on the beach at ports of call, which she knew would lead to other horse riding activities. Will and Corey met as sophomores at Duke University, where they were both studying business. They quickly became friends and also became fraternity brothers by joining Sigma Chi. After graduating from university, they decided to go into business together. They founded a startup technology company that specializes in helping high school students choose a college. On average, more than 2.9 million students enroll in colleges and universities throughout the United States each year. Many of these families have the means to help their children make the best school choice. In 3 years, they broke even, and by 12, they will each receive $250,000 after taxes and expenses. Every year, they learn from market research how to improve their product and optimize their services. They were still young and full of ambition. Neither of them were motivated by money, but once they started making money, they agreed that having money was better than not having money. Although they were not yet rich, they were getting there. Their goal was to have their company acquired by a major tech firm within the next 3 years, and then decide which mountain they wanted to conquer next. Will and Ellie met their sophomore year after graduation in Charlotte, North Carolina, where Will and Corey founded their company. Ellie Shriver attended Sweetbriar College in Sweetbriar, Virginia, 2 hours west of Richmond. She was a member of the equestrian team and specialized in equine studies. Her dream was to own an equestrian center, or, better yet, her own horse farm. She took her first job out of school on such a farm north of Charlotte. She met Will when he and Corey took their small team of 6 out for an afternoon horseback ride. Neither Will nor Corey knew much about horses, but they thought it would be a fun day with the staff outside the office. Will immediately fell in love with the young woman who was taking them for a walk. Ellie was not dating anyone and thought Will was handsome, friendly, and well-mannered. He obtained her phone number from one of her colleagues and waited an agonizing 3 days before texting her. She wasn't surprised to hear from him. They both felt chemistry during the trip, so she agreed to meet him for coffee. 11 months later, they were married and enjoyed an amazing September honeymoon through Maroon Bells near Aspen, Colorado. Will set a limit on the outdoors for their post-wedding getaway. They made several day trips, but returned each night to the St. Regis for a relaxing evening that included a combination of ice, hot tub, and massage for Will's sore ass. Ellie teased him mercilessly, but deep down she was charmed by his thoughtful approach to their first week as husband and wife. Their sex life, like most young couples, was 2 steps forward, 1 step back. They were both comfortable with their bodies, but learning to please their partner and share their likes and dislikes was a bit of a learning curve. Neither of them had been particularly active sexually before marriage, so they were exploring new territory. However, they were both eager students, and by the 3rd year sex was going smoothly 2 to 3 times a week. "You're becoming a real rider," Ellie teased Will one night after particularly rough sex. "Well, thanks," he replied, hitting back. "I guess I can be proud of the fact that I tamed my mare and helped her learn her pace." This earned him a pillow to the face, followed by another 30 minutes of vigorous sex. Corey, on the other hand, was a bit of a womanizer. He was not a scoundrel, but he was not yet ready to become a prince for anyone. Ellie introduced him to her friends several times, but after he broke up with her after a month or 2, She decided it was wiser to keep her friends away from him. She didn't hate Corey, they were friendly, but she didn't like his dating methods, which she considered immature. She expected him to grow out of it, but he never showed any interest in it. Like Will, he was a very attractive guy. 6'2", dark hair with deep brown eyes, Corey worked out regularly and was in great shape. Unlike Will, who was a little shorter with white hair and blue eyes, Corey enjoyed the hunt. He took most of the women he dated to bed, but lost interest after his first conquest. Ellie regularly reproached him for this. "Corey, you can't just have sex with them and move on," she declared one day when she was particularly annoyed with him. "Of course I can, Al," he replied with a look of mock pain. "I never promise love or relationships, and they're all adults. Besides, if I ever meet someone like you, I might be tempted to stay." Turning to Will, he added, "Really, brother? Don't drag me into this, friend," his friend replied wisely, correctly reading his wife's expression. "I may be ugly, but I'm not a fool." He was neither one nor the other. He was just trying to avoid an argument with his loving wife. Meanwhile, recently at the ranch. And so, a week before her husband's surprise anniversary trip, Ellie happily hummed to herself while preparing a very romantic dinner. Horse riding has always been her passion. The force between her thighs also gave her strong sexual desires. She and Will had the best sex after her time in the saddle. Early in the morning, she headed for 2 hours to Seabrook Island stables to ride a magnificent horse named Helen Holmes, after the wild rodeo woman of the early 20th century. The energetic horse gave Ellie a great workout, which she enjoyed immensely. She decided to cook barefoot in a very short sundress without a bra or panties. Still cooking, she was as sexually tense as a drum when she heard a Mustang convertible pull up on the gravel driveway outside the secluded cottage. Footsteps approached along the path. He was almost there. A shiver ran down her spine as the door opened and he entered. She didn't turn to meet him, but leaned over the table, reaching for an ingredient for the main course. Her legs were visible almost all the way to her butt. When he saw her, he couldn't resist. "No panties," he hissed, filled with lust. "Oh my God, we're such a bad girl, aren't we?" "Damn you, Corey," she said. "I can't believe how good you have me. Go take a shower. Dinner will be ready in 5 minutes. And then, a little later, I will serve you the best dessert of your life." 9 months ago, Corey felt that he was close to his goal of getting his business partner's wife into bed. Ellie was angry with Corey most of the time, but he saw it as part of the game. Over the years, he'd asked her from time to time to introduce him to some of her prettier single friends. She did this several times, eventually regretting it. Corey loved them and gave them up within a month or two. She thought it was selfish of him to just want sex without any strings attached. His behavior irritated Ellie when she had to console one of her friends. For Corey, this was part of the plan. That never stopped him from having sex with some of Ellie's friends for two reasons. First, he was an American with red bloods, which meant that he enjoyed sex immensely. But more importantly for Corey, it gave him the opportunity to learn more about Ellie from her friends. He was a master at getting women to trust him and open up to him. He skillfully asked seemingly harmless questions about her without arousing suspicion. This gave him an idea of how to slowly seduce her into bed. Corey knew he had to be patient about this. It was a long-term approach. In his opinion, he truly cared about his business partner, Will. They had been friends since college, and their startup company was thriving. Corey had no ill will toward Will, and he wasn't trying to prove that he had more in his pants than his friend. In fact, he knew from their shared visits to the locker room that they were about the same size. No, for Corey it was just a challenge, a dance, as he called it. He was confident that with enough work and dedication, he could take any woman, single or married, to bed. Until now, it had been almost exclusively single women, but Ellie was great, and she thought he was a jerk. What could be better than to take to bed a beautiful, intelligent woman who truly loved her husband and hated him? Corey didn't mean to hurt Will. Once he wins Ellie, he will enjoy it for a while, and then convince her that they should stop for the sake of her love for Will. Guilt will force her to agree, and they will end their relationship, maybe once or twice a year. Will never know, so he won't be hurt. He will instruct Ellie to have a stronger and better husband to make sure of this. Everyone wins in the end. For years, Corey has been pushing and teasing. He made her angry and then apologized for hurting her friends. Ellie scolded him and complained about him to Will. "Your partner is such a bastard," she shouted. Corey eventually apologized enough to win her over with his childish smile and puppy-doggy eyes. He gave her small gifts, nothing inappropriate, but she liked what he learned. A certain type of dark chocolate that she loved, or a scarf that one of her friends mentioned she loved. This was always accompanied by a guilty, "I'm bad, but please love me," look that eventually won her over. He always knew he was back in her good graces when she would hug him and say, "I still hate your damn ass, but you can be so sweet whenever you want." It happened at the end of January of this year when he made his breakthrough. Just before Christmas, he met, dated, and befriended Ellie's stablemate Joe. Joe was a tall, leggy redhead with a lively personality and a creativity in bed that almost made Corey reconsider his ultimate goal. They ended sex about 30 minutes after their first kiss at midnight on December 31st. Breaking their kiss, they quickly left the New Year's party and headed 2 miles across town to his apartment. When they woke up, they started again from where they left off a few hours ago. As much as Corey loved sex with Joe, it was the moments away from her when he could remember what he really wanted. She was great, but she was a means to an end. He wanted Ellie, and he wanted her badly. He knew that if he kept pushing the right buttons, he would succeed and end up on top and under and behind, and he let his imagination run wild. On January 23rd, he was at Will and Ellie's to watch back-to-back Sunday night football games. Corey and Will were drinking beer in Will's office while watching the NFC and AFC championship games. Ellie's phone rang during the second quarter of an AFC game. She grabbed the phone and answered it, leaving the room. Both Corey and Will heard the first few sentences of her conversation. "Hey, Joe, what's up, girl?" "What? No, you can't be serious, he didn't do it." "Joe, try to calm down and tell me what happened." Then they heard the kitchen chair move sharply away and fall to the floor, and footsteps stomping across the corridor. "That damn bastard, I'm going to kick his ass." Door slam. Will looked at Corey, knowing what happened. "Seriously, brother? Did you break your heart again?" "Sorry, Will. I know this is making things difficult for you and Ellie, but Joe just wasn't for me, and I couldn't drag her down." "Corey, when the hell are you going to grow up? Why don't you wait until you know if you really like someone before you take her to bed? She screams at you for 10 to 20 minutes, and then she complains to me for at least a week. And that obviously means no sex. Dude, I'm sorry, I need to listen to you and get my head out of my ass. One day she might just shoot me. Well, I don't have a gun, but I can't promise she won't buy one." Damn, he intercepted the ball again. A few minutes later, Ellie stormed out of the bedroom and ran into Corey. "You're such an asshole, Corey. You're such a fucking asshole, Parker." He knew things were bad when she started calling him by his last name. "I'm sorry, Al. Joe is a wonderful girl, but I just—" She didn't let him finish. "Shut up, Corey," Ellie screamed and screamed, irritating herself. She grabbed a throw pillow from the couch and started hitting him with it. She cried, every time, you just use them and then throw them away. Why, Corey? What the hell is happening to you?" Corey managed to get up and walk around the couch, trying to put some distance between himself and her blows. It was just a pillow, but it was strong and the impacts were quite noticeable. She paused for a moment to catch her breath, and when she did, Corey grabbed his jacket and hurried to the front door. "You're acting crazy, Ellie. I'm really sorry that I offended Joe, but I think I'd better go away and let you cool off. Maybe we can talk when you calm down." With these words, he almost walked out the door. "Cool down? Calm down?" she shouted, following him along the sidewalk. "You sleep with my friends, you son of a bitch, and you tell me to calm down?" She threw the pillow as he closed the door to dodge her final blow. But Ellie was so furious that she opened the door and continued to follow him down the sidewalk. Will sat on the couch, deciding that avoiding this battle was the best thing he could do. "I'm not done with you yet, Corey Parker. Get your lousy ass back here," Ellie screamed as she followed him to his car. Corey parked in front of their house, not in the driveway, and there was a hedge that blocked the view of anyone looking from the house to the street. They were alone. Corey raised his hands in surrender. "Okay, Al, wait a minute," he said in a calmer voice. "First of all, it's about 28 degrees, and you're barefoot and wearing just a t-shirt. You should get back inside before you freeze." He didn't want her to get sick while out in the cold. Her teeth were chattering, but she had no intention of stopping. "The hell with it, Parker." Then she started crying again. "Why, Corey, tell me why. You shouldn't be such a bastard to my girlfriends or to any woman at all. What happened to you?" This was the moment he had been waiting for, and now it had come. He put on his best puppy face and responded. "Do you want to know, Ellie? Are you sure what you want me to say? Once I say it, there's no turning back." Ellie was a little surprised by his vulnerability. She had always seen him as a superficial person, but in an instant he showed her another side, an intriguing side. "Yes, Corey," she said more calmly. "Please tell me." "You, Ellie, you are the reason I can't stay with any of them. I know you're married, hell, you're married to my best friend. But every time I'm with another woman, your face is the only face I see. Your face is the only face I want to see. I'm sorry, Al, but I'm crazy about you, and all I want is to be with you." "But Corey, we can't. I'm flattered, of course, and deep down, I really do care about you, but we can't." There is a fine line between anger and passion. She didn't realize it at the time, but Corey was going to pull her over that line, and she would go willingly. He didn't let her finish her thoughts. He grabbed her with his strong hands. Looking at her with warmth and lust, he kissed her. He kissed her deeply, holding her head with one hand and holding her waist tightly with the other. He knew this was the moment of truth. She'll either punch him in the face and go back into the house, and the dance will be lost, or she'll respond. She didn't resist, but she didn't give in either. After a few seconds, her words turned into a soft, inviting moan. She responded with a kiss. Ellie hugged his neck and melted in his embrace. Their tongues fought for control, each delving deeper into the other. This lasted more than a minute. Passion, lust, anger, and raw energy all mixed together in an instant. Finally, they broke the kiss, but did not let each other go. "Oh, damn, what have I done?" Ellie whispered. He didn't try to explain or answer her question since it wasn't directed at him. He simply leaned down and they kissed again. This time his hands roamed over her body, exploring her breasts. She didn't stop him. She pressed herself against him and reached below his waist. They kissed for a while longer before she pulled away. "Corey, please. I can't do this. Not here. Not now." What she didn't say was more telling. She didn't say never. Corey knew he had achieved as much as he could at this point. "Ellie, I won't say I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. I don't want to hurt my friend, but that's not the same as deciding not to be with you. This could be our secret. You know me, I'm not the marriage type. As amazing as you are, I'm not going to steal you from him. I don't think I could even if I wanted to. But don't you want to enjoy this moment together? Don't you want to let yourself go and use our lust for the amazing pleasure it can bring?" "But Will, we can have this and make sure Will doesn't find out. We both know this won't last long. Intense flames go out the fastest. A few months, maybe a year at most, and it will all be over. But then we will have memories of an amazing connection with an amazing person for the rest of our lives." He saw that she was beginning to give in. "I know it would be amazing, Corey, but how can we be sure it won't blow up and ruin my marriage to the person I want to spend my whole life with? People get caught because they are stupid and careless. Since we are neither one nor the other, I am confident that we can do this without anyone getting hurt." "No, I don't think so," was all she said as she walked out of the cafe at a brisk pace. She was determined that it won't happen as she walked to her car. Corey wasn't the least bit discouraged. He knew she had crossed the line and there was no turning back. It may take time, but he will help her take the next steps. He sat there a little longer, making plans, and then he got Will's coffee and went back to the office to lie about how Ellie had scolded him. The next steps came within a week. Will needed to go to Winston-Salem to meet with a couple of technicians they were recruiting from Wake Forest. Knowing that she would have the evening to herself, Ellie rode horseback for an hour after work and returned home, shivering from the February cold. After taking a shower, she felt incredibly horny. After her shower, she put on a warm terry robe and went downstairs to sit by the fireplace with a glass of wine. Will called to say that everything was going well and he would be home for lunch the next day. She teased him as she caressed herself. "I'd really like to make love tonight," she thought. "No, that's not right. I really want to have sex tonight." 10 minutes later, there was a light knock on the back door. Startled, Ellie turned and looked. There was the devil in the flesh, Corey Parker, her passion and her demise, smiling and holding a bottle of Camus 40th Anniversary Edition 2012 wine. Something clicked, and she didn't hesitate, throwing open the door and throwing herself into his arms, kissing him like it was the last time she'd kiss anyone on earth. There was no one in the area on such a cold February night. Corey took Will's jacket and put on his cap in case anyone saw him. Nobody has seen it. Corey picked her up, threw her over his shoulder, and carried her up the stairs to the Bentons' marital bed. "I didn't plan to take her here, but she won't stop me, so," he thought as he threw her on the bed, making it clear that he had come to claim his rights. She didn't do anything to stop him. Corey was in great shape, as was Will. Both trained regularly. While his body was great to look at, it wasn't what captured Ellie's attention. These were his eyes. They were filled with pure lust. Corey's gaze was purely animalistic. She looked back at him. "What are you going to do, Parker? I think you better leave right now. You are not the man for me. You may be able to charm some of my girlfriends with your eyes, but not me. I'm not impressed. Get out of my bedroom now." Her challenge only spurred him on. He loved it. "Bitch, you know you want it." He grabbed the laces of her robe and untied it. She stood up and started pushing him towards the door. Instantly, he grabbed her hands, lifted them above her head, and pinned her against the wall. He kissed her deeply, growling into her mouth. Then they had animal sex. She ran her hand over his face. "You are a bad, bad person, Corey Parker. I can't believe what you did to me." "Maybe you should ask me to leave," he said with a smile. "Hell no," she replied. "I want you to take me in the shower after we get some rest and get your dirty little girl clean. And then we can start again if you think you can handle it." After a few minutes, he did as she asked. They quickly dried themselves with towels and returned to bed. Finally, after a couple of hours and another shower, they cuddled and drifted off to sleep. Before Ellie fell asleep, she finally thought about Will. Corey wisely set the alarm on his phone for 6:30 a.m. He let her sleep, making coffee and assessing the situation. They needed to be very careful in the coming months. He began to wonder if a short affair with her would be enough. Ellie was an incredible woman and lover. She gave him everything he could handle and more. He liked that she was submissive at times and let him lead. But she also pushed him like no other woman, and that carried him away. Ellie woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and saw Corey looking at her with a smile. She sat up and headed to the bathroom. A few minutes later, they sat side by side, sipping coffee and talking quietly. After they drank a cup, they headed to the kitchen for more. But before enjoying her coffee, Ellie was once again bent over the kitchen table, enjoying another round of her lover's sexual attention. 2 hours later, the bed linen was washed and Corey was in the office. Will had just gotten into his car, heading home to his loving wife. Ellie knew that Will would want to make love in the evening, and in some twisted way, she wanted him to take her back. She knew she would continue to have sex with Corey, but somehow she convinced herself that she could keep them separate and enjoy both. She and Corey were talking this morning about being extra careful. She was sure it could work until they both got tired of their sexual experimentation, and she returned to being a faithful wife. The word treason never occurred to her. Like 99.9% of the human race, She considered herself a basically good person. What she was doing probably wasn't right, but she didn't allow herself to see it as wrong. I love Will and I will never stop, she thought to herself. She didn't question how love, fidelity, and adultery with her husband's business partner could be acceptable. That's the thing about betrayal, you can't think too much about it. If you start, you will see the holes in your argument and realize that you have made a moral mistake. So Ellie, like many others, just decided it would be okay and carried on. For the next 8 months, Corey and Ellie spent at least one day a week together in bed, in the car, on the couch, under the moonlight in the park, and even in a remote corner of the huge parking lot at Lowe's Motor Speedway. They never met in the same place more than once, and always at a time when they could not be detected. Hotels were used approximately every third meeting. Corey was organizing it in a nearby town so he could write it off as a business expense. Ellie, in turn, told Will that she needed to look at the horse or investigate a competing stable. Following Corey's instructions, Ellie continued to love her husband, as she always had. It wasn't difficult for her, as she really enjoyed it in many aspects. Will was too trusting of both of them. He never suspected anything. When Will told Corey in August that he was planning a surprise 10th anniversary cruise to the Caribbean in September, Corey decided that he would try to arrange a weekend away with Ellie a week or two before. He knew Ellie was starting to worry that they were taking too many risks. As Corey had predicted, his interest in her continued, but he was also determined not to let his friend find out about the affair. Perhaps this will be their last meeting. Perhaps. Recently, back in Charleston, Corey gave Ellie one more kiss and then headed towards the outdoor shower off the master bedroom, knowing their night was going to be epic. If any of them felt the slightest remorse for the cruel game they played, they did not talk about it. "Dinner can wait a few minutes," she whispered in his ear. Her cell phone rang, but she ignored it, which turned out to be one of the biggest mistakes of her life, because, after all, every cheater fails one day. A few minutes later, 3 hours before Charleston, an unsuspecting Will Benton was enjoying Chinese takeout when his cell phone rang. The area code was 843. Because of his business, Will knew many area codes, especially in the southeastern United States. Charleston, he thought to himself. He did not receive calls from clients on his mobile phone and did not remember having any close friends in the area. "Hello. Hello, this is Gemma Hartnell. I'm trying to contact Ellie Benton." "Well, you are close. This is her husband, Will. Is there anything I can do to help?" "I'm sorry to bother you while on vacation, Mr. Benton, but Mrs. Benton was on a walk with us in Kiowa today, and her purse must have fallen out of her bag when she left. I think she hasn't discovered this yet, otherwise she would have already come back for him. Anyway, we had her mobile number from her booking, but she didn't answer. It was the only other number I could find in her wallet, so I decided to try calling you. I'm so glad I got through to you." Before she could continue, Will interrupted her. "You said Ellie Benton, right?" "Yes, sir." "Can you confirm her address from her driver's license?" "Sure, give me a second. 1810 Falling Leaf Drive." "This is our address, but there must be some mistake. Ellie is at the horse show in Lexington, Kentucky this weekend." Will felt his palms begin to sweat. "Excuse me, sir," replied the young woman on the other end of the line. Gemma started to get nervous too, not knowing what she had gotten herself into but wanting to get out of it as quickly as possible. "If you talk to her, can you tell her that her wallet is in Seabrook Stables?" Yes, I'm sorry," Will stuttered, trying to comprehend this call. "I'll definitely tell her. I think she'll pick him up tonight or tomorrow." Will hung up and went to his laptop to open the trip plan Ellie had given him. She left early in the morning and will return home on Sunday evening. At the top of the page he read, "Champagne Run Jumper Stumpers, Lexington, Kentucky, September 10th, 12." It was this weekend, and apparently Ellie wasn't there. What was she doing in Charleston or Kiowa Island? He asked the question loudly to no one in particular. Why would she lie to me about this? There must be some reasonable explanation. Will was an intelligent and methodical man. He sat down and forced himself to consider his options. She could be planning a surprise for the two of them later in the fall, but it could all be done using a laptop. She couldn't prepare anything for their anniversary, since he clearly hinted that he had a surprise. Could it be that there was a show in Charleston this weekend too? Did she change her plans at the last minute and not tell him not to think she was frivolous? He quickly searched the Charleston Visitor's website for schedules for anything even remotely horse-related. Nothing. Something with the sorority sisters that she didn't want to tell him about. But why? He wouldn't care if she was at the bachelorette party. None of these and other thoughts made sense. Then he wrote down the last thing he didn't want to think about, but couldn't help it. Is she cheating? He immediately felt a lump in his throat and a knot in his stomach. There were no other reasonable explanations. He thought he had married the most amazing woman in the world. A beautiful woman, an intelligent and gifted woman, a woman with whom he planned to spend his whole life, a faithful woman. What should he do? He needed to think and process, but he also needed to calm down. He needed to ground himself, so he turned to the one name he thought could help him. Corey. He started to press speed dial button #2 when he suddenly stopped. Oh shit, he thought as he began to put together the puzzle pieces he was desperately hoping he wouldn't put together. Corey went to Florida to visit his parents this weekend, right? He scrolled through the list until he found Marty Parker's number and pressed a call on his cell phone. Will, to what do I owe this honor? I hope you and my son are still conquering the world. Hey, Marty, I'm trying to find Corey. His cell phone isn't answering, he lied, but he told me he'll be with you and Vera this weekend. It's not urgent, just a question. Is he nearby? I think you're wrong, Will, Marty replied. Corey told me he'll be in Hilton Head with a couple of fraternity brothers this weekend. Would you like me to try to contact him? Will fought to maintain his composure. Don't worry, Marty, I probably got the weekend mixed up. I left him a message. He'll probably call back. Hello, Vera, he could barely say before hanging up. This can't be, Will desperately tried to reason. Not his best friend and his wife. Please don't let this be true. He sat there for over an hour, trying to breathe normally and think logically. What should he do? Get on a plane and try to find them and run into them? This is crazy. There was no way for him to know where they were staying if they were together. Ignore until Sunday evening and ask for an explanation when Ellie returns home. This won't work because if she lies, she will cover her tracks and continue to lie. He was sure she would probably have the Lexington hotel bill to prove it. Ellie wasn't stupid. He wasn't any closer to a decision an hour later, so he Googled divorce laws in North Carolina. North Carolina was a no-fault divorce state, and they had no children, so child support was no longer an issue. However, alimony was another issue. Would she want half of his 50% company? If so, she and Corey would hold the majority and could oust him. Was this their plan all along? What about fault-based divorce? Right there, in bold print under chapter January 6th, 50 Reasons for Divorce, were two words, commits adultery. But there was a huge weight of evidence there, and if she was cheating on him with Corey, all he had was a phone call from the stable employee. Only one thing seemed clear to him. If Ellie and Corey cheated, he was doomed. He could have walked away from the money. It wasn't that important to him. He was a talented guy and helped build a very successful company. He could get a well-paying job at any of the many companies, or perhaps start his own. Will also knew he wouldn't be able to play detective for several months. He couldn't pretend to be a loving husband during this time, while the private investigator was investigating. It was late Friday night when he finally gave in and decided that the law of diminishing returns was taking effect. He was running in circles in his thoughts. I took 3 Tylenol PM tablets, set my alarm for 8 a.m. and went to bed. After 30 minutes and a lot of tears, the drugs began to work. It was past midnight in Charleston when Corey and Ellie sat on the screened-in porch after an amazing dinner, a moonlit walk on the beach, and 2 hours of great sex. The first hour was rough and unforgiving sex, as if both partners needed to dominate each other. When they returned from their walk, Ellie ran a bath in a deep vintage clawfoot tub, and told her lover to wait patiently for her in the king-size 4-poster bed. "No more waiting, bitch," he growled, walking straight to the tub. Ellie would never tolerate Will treating her like a fuck toy, but for some reason Corey's insatiable sexual desire was driving her crazy. She loved it when he took control, and she also loved that he wanted her so much. She knew he had other bitches, as she called them, but he always wanted her more than any other. It gave her a twisted sense of pride. A moment later, they moved into the bedroom. 15 minutes later, they sat on the porch, talking quietly in the afterglow of their argument. Ellie was wearing very short shorts and a t-shirt that barely covered her breasts. Corey was wearing loose Nike shorts. Her legs lay on his lap, and he massaged her feet and calves. "What are we doing, Corey?" "What do you mean, baby? I think you know perfectly well what we did." "Don't be smart," she replied, hitting him on the shoulder. "Why are we doing this? We've been together for over 8 months. You have more girls than you want, and I have a husband whom I love." The last word stuck in her throat. She felt that she truly loved her husband deeply, but how could she say it with a straight face, considering where she was and what she was doing? Corey knew better than to tease her about her love for Will. In truth, he also felt remorse when she said his name. He knew him almost 7 years longer than she did. They spent 8-10 hours every day in each other's offices planning, revising, pushing, creating, and developing. Corey didn't have any brothers or sisters, so Will was like a brother to him. "I don't know, Ellie. I just can't keep my mind or my hands off you. I love Will too, but you fascinate me and I have to have you. Maybe you just can't accept the fact that Will has something that you don't. Maybe. We have this weekend, and then Will and I go on a cruise on Tuesday. He must never, ever suspect us. You drive me crazy and I love sex, but I want to live with Will as my husband and, hopefully soon, the father of our children. I hope you're not implying that this weekend will be our last time." "I'm not sure, but no, I don't think I'm saying that. I don't think I can give up your amazing sexual skills overnight. Don't get cocky, stud, but you always make me see stars when we have sex. It's too late to tell me not to get arrogant." With that, he stood up, picked her up, and carried her to bed. Maybe this won't be their last flirtation. He thought for a moment before they indulged in their desires again. At 8 a.m. sharp, Will Benton got out of bed. A little sleepy from too many sleeping pills, he took a cold shower and cleared his mind. He brewed a pot of coffee and finished the plan he had made in the last half hour. 5 minutes later, he was dialing the after-hours number of Sterling private investigators in Charleston, South Carolina. The service operator took his information and promised that one of their highly trained professionals would call him back within 30 minutes. Private detectives make money only from what they get, so the return call came in less than 10 minutes. "Mr. Benton, this is Amanda Cunningham. How may I help?" Will outlined everything according to the points he wrote. His wife, Ellie Benton, said she was going to Lexington for the weekend, but somehow dropped her wallet at the stables on Kiowa Island. He was afraid that she was there with her lover, his business partner, Corey Parker. If they were there, he had no idea where they were staying, but assumed it was a private house or cottage, perhaps somewhere secluded to maintain secrecy. They will probably be there until tomorrow, so time is short. He needs information, and he needs it fast. He needed irrefutable evidence, including photographs, videos, audio recordings, etc. Cost didn't matter. Amanda chuckled silently at the last point. "Don't worry, Mr. Benton. Once we receive your 50% deposit, our team will find them if they are here and find out what they are doing. We don't call ourselves highly qualified professionals to attract clients. Our small firm of 5 people has a total of over 30 years of experience in the fields of surveillance, espionage, and covert operations. I'll know their whereabouts within the hour." They spent another 15 minutes discussing the details, as Will wanted to know a little more before paying the $6,000 down payment. Her answers were specific and convincing. Will received her transfer details and made the electronic transfer. They agreed that she would call him no later than noon with an update. Around the same time, Ellie listened to her voicemails from the night before. She also remembered that she forgot to call Will to see how he was doing. She did it from the Mustang while Corey drove her back to Kiowa to pick up the wallet. Her call went to voicemail, and she left Will a very loving and very deceitful message about horses and the pathetic breakfast at the North Lexington Courtyard Marriott. She sincerely assured him that she was looking forward to whatever he had planned for the next week in honor of their 10th anniversary. When they arrived at Seabrook, she ran into the office and picked up her wallet. Gemma wasn't working that morning, so she didn't know about the call she made to Will. They decided to do a little shopping on King Street and have a shrimp and grits lunch at slightly north of Broad. While Will gave Amanda and her team time to work, he contacted Ed Simmons, a longtime friend of his father and an excellent lawyer. Ed was getting ready to play golf at Cedarwood Golf and Country Club when the call came. He decided to answer. After a 5-minute conversation, he apologized to his playing partners, gave his caddy the lightest $100 tip he had ever received, and headed straight to 1810 Falling Leaf Drive. Ed and Will spent 90 minutes discussing the initial information to determine the best options for Will once the data was received. Ed correctly guessed that Will's wife was cheating on someone, probably Corey. At 11:57 m, Will's phone rang. Amanda was on the other end. She briefly outlined what she had found out. Ellie was definitely in town and rode to Seabrook yesterday. She had been there earlier this morning with a man in a red Mustang convertible, picking up her wallet. The man matched the description of Mr. Corey Parker. The car was hired from National Car Rental by Mr. Parker, and the local address given was a single cottage at the northern end of Folly Island, somewhat removed from other houses and affording sufficient privacy. The couple then spent 2 hours shopping downtown on King Street. 10 minutes ago, they were sitting at Snob, ordering lunch. She was pretty sure it was shrimp and grits, but she couldn't be sure. Surveillance and recording equipment is currently being installed at the cottage while the couple are away. How the hell did you figure all this out so quickly? Will burst out. Before Amanda could respond, Ed interrupted the conversation. Mrs. Cunningham, this is Ed Simmons, Mr. Benton's lawyer. Mrs. Cunningham, but call me Amanda, Mr. Simmons. Sorry, Amanda, call me Ed. Unfortunately, I think you and I will be speaking several times in the coming weeks, so I need to ask you to follow some protocols that will help my client in this unpleasant matter. Do you mind if I record this conversation? Yes, sure. Before I do this, can you please confirm receipt of my client's bail? I have the account information and have already sent the money back to you. My firm is officially hiring you on behalf of my client. Send all invoices to me at the email address I will give you. Yes, I understand. One of my assistants is already verifying this information, and we will immediately return the deposit to Mr. Benton. Okay, thank you. Now here's what I want you and your team to do. For the next 30 minutes, we'll listen with intense attention as these two highly trained professionals developed a plan of action. He was amazed by their interaction. Amanda listened carefully and only intervened when she believed she had a better way to achieve Ed's goals. For his part, Ed was willing to listen to other ideas and accepted several of her suggestions. Thank you, Amanda, Ed concluded. I'll let you get back to work since you have a lot to do and very little time. Got it, Amanda replied, hanging up. Will, I need to know your purpose. Do you want to try to restore your relationship, or are you thinking about divorce? I don't want to put you on such a tight deadline. I usually always advise clients to think about it, but I'm not sure you have that luxury right now. It will be fine if the plan changes along the way, but I need to know now what direction I need to go in. Will wasn't an impulsive person, but it seemed obvious. I loved her with all my heart and trusted her to love her back. She betrayed me and our marriage. My partner did the same with our business. This isn't some crazy drunk moment at an office party. This is deliberate betrayal, and I cannot tolerate it. This couldn't be the first time they were together. Since she deliberately broke her vows and my partner abused our partnership with the same indifference, I want them both out of my life as soon as possible. Nothing I can think or will think will make me stay with her or continue doing business with him. Even if it costs me all the money I have, so be it, but I want them to feel the pain that I feel today. Tears welled up in his eyes as he spoke. Ed reached across the table and squeezed his shoulder firmly in support. Okay, Will, assuming we find out what we think we'll find out from Amanda and her team, here's what you'll do. By Sunday afternoon, Ellie was very worried. She called Will 5 times, 3 times on Saturday and twice on Sunday morning. All she received in response was a polite but brief text reply. Busy with the crisis, we'll talk on Sunday evening. Enjoy Lexington. She showed it to Corey and asked him to call Will to find out what was going on. She assumed it was a business problem, but deep down she wondered, he couldn't know, could he? How can I call him Ellie? Corey asked. He did not contact me to report any problems in the office. If I call, what should I say? Hey, Will, Ellie and I are in Charleston, having sex like bunnies, but she thinks we have a problem at work, so she asked me to check on you. Damn, you're right, I'm not thinking clearly, his lover replied. It must be work-related, there is no way for him to know. You told him you were visiting your parents this weekend, so maybe he just doesn't want to bother you. Yeah, that should be it, Corey replied, not sounding very convincing. While showering together before they headed to the airport, they tried to make love, but Corey felt that Ellie's thoughts were back in Charlotte, so he didn't push. He grinned to himself, lots of sex when we get back, and it turns out to be nothing. 3 minutes after they left the cottage, an AT&T van pulled up. 2 workers entered the residence to dismantle and assemble their equipment. 30 minutes later, Amanda and her 2 assistants were reviewing the tapes. An hour later, one of the men remarked, "Damn, they have endurance." Corey dropped Ellie off at the terminal and went to return the rental car. As he did this, his father called him. "What happened, Dad?" "Hey, son, just wanted to know how you were. I hope you enjoy Hilton Head." "Yes, I'm not a very good player, but we played a lot of golf and ate great seafood. Are you and Mom okay?" "Yes, sure. Look, son, I won't keep you, but Will called me on Friday night and was looking for you. For some reason, he thought you were visiting us this weekend. I reminded him that you were in Hilton Head, but that surprised me because he doesn't usually make mistakes like that. Is everything okay with him?" Corey felt a lump in his throat and tried to sound normal. "He's got a lot on his mind right now, Dad. I think he and Ellie want to start a family, and he's a little worried about being a dad. I'm sure he just got the dates mixed up. I'm still planning to come back in 3 weeks for the weekend." His father seemed satisfied with his answer. They chatted a little more and said goodbye. Corey decided not to tell Ellie about this. It's probably nothing, and I don't want to upset her before her flight home. They flew separately just in case, and their flights were on time. Since Ellie only had carry-on luggage, she went straight to her car in the long-term parking lot and headed home. She was still nervous, but she calmed down and collected her thoughts on the way home. Traffic was light early Sunday evening, so she made it home quickly. She couldn't wait to see Will and make sure her deception wasn't discovered. She had to play the role of a tired wife after a long weekend, but was so happy to see her husband. She wanted to take a shower and make love to him. But as it turned out, she didn't have to pretend, and she didn't have a chance to do it. When she pulled up to the house and pressed the garage door remote, she got the first hint, although she didn't pay much attention to it. The remote control didn't work. Damn batteries, she thought. Then she noticed that the house was dark. Only the porch lamp was on. She walked up to the front door with her rolling suitcase. As she approached, she saw an envelope taped to the door with her name on a typewriter. She tucked it under her arm and inserted the key into the lock. She tried several times, but the key didn't fit. She began to tremble. She let go of her bag and sat down on one of the Adirondack chairs on the porch. She tore the envelope and a moment later burst into tears. "Mrs. Benton, this letter informs you that your husband, Will Benton, has retained me as his attorney. My client has learned that you are engaged in an adulterous and illicit sexual relationship with his business partner, Corey Parker. He knows that you have not been to Lexington, Kentucky in the last few days, but have in fact been in Charleston, South Carolina with your lover, the aforementioned Mr. Parker. You should. Through my office, Mr. Benton will provide evidence of his knowledge of your betrayal of him and your marriage to Mr. Parker. Mr. Benton has changed the locks on his house and asks you to find another place to live in the near future. As you remember, the mortgage is in his name only, so you have no legal right to enter without his permission. Also, please do not try to contact my client. He will contact you through my office within the next week for an initial conversation regarding separation and divorce. Mr. Benton will give you the opportunity to enter the house under proper supervision and collect your personal effects tomorrow morning. Again, please contact me, not Mr. Benton, to make this arrangement. I strongly recommend that you seek legal assistance in this matter. When you do this, please give them my name and contact information. Mr. Benton has assured me that there are sufficient funds in your joint account to cover any immediate expenses, such as accommodation, if necessary. Please use your Bank of America debit card, as all co-branded credit cards have been paid off and canceled. He asked me to tell you that it might be in your financial interests to ask Mr. Parker if you could stay with him. Sincerely, Edward M. Simmons, a lawyer. Simmons, and Wyckoff. It took Ellie a few minutes to compose herself. She began trying to call Will, ignoring or forgetting the instructions she had just read. 5 minutes later, she received a text message from Ed Simmons. Mrs. Benton, I insist that you respect my client's wishes not to attempt to contact him directly. Ellie sat and looked at the message screen. Across town, Corey Parker's keys arrived at his condominium, but he also received a letter from Simmons, and Wyckoff. To Mr. Corey Parker. From Edward Simmons, attorney. Simmons, and Wyckoff. My client, your business partner, Mr. William J. Benton, has learned that you are having illicit sexual relations with his wife, making her guilty of adultery. It was also discovered through an initial financial audit conducted by Randolph Michaels, CPA, CFI, MAF, that company funds were used to finance at least 8 meetings between you and Mrs. Eleanor Benton in violation of the law. To avoid both criminal and civil prosecution, my client, Mr. Benton, wishes to negotiate the dissolution of the partnership and the purchase of your 50% interest in the company. You should obtain legal and financial advice regarding this matter. Please do not attempt to contact my client directly. Please direct all communications you wish to my attention at eds@ssw.com. Any violation of this request will be considered a violation of the terms and conditions set forth in the 3rd paragraph above and will result in immediate legal and civil action against you. Corey Parker began to curse himself. Damn, how many times have I taken Ellie with me and chalked it up to entertainment expenses for clients? He realized that he had already electronically sent about $1,000 from last weekend to the accountant for reimbursement. He knew that Will rarely looked closely at expenses, and Diana, an accountant, had no reason to suspect him of anything illegal. The annual independent audit was completed 2 weeks ago, and they found no discrepancies. He thought that since it was a small amount, no one would notice. The total amount couldn't be more than a few $1,000s, but there's definitely a scheme there that a son of a bitch like Michaels could have discovered. Damn it! He spent the rest of the night drinking and trying to figure out where to start a perimeter defense. He was better off drinking bourbon than deciding his next steps. Ellie called and texted him more than a dozen times that evening. He ignored them all. Damn bitch, I have a giant problem. Solve your problems and leave me alone, he thought. How quickly the shaky foundation of a relationship built on lust crumbles. Ellie sat on her porch in a daze of shock. Somehow her husband learned much more than she gave him credit for. Her lover, as she now reluctantly called him, ignored her calls and messages. I think now I know where I stand with him, bastard. If Ellie had ever thought about it, she would have realized that Corey might be good at business and a good friend in fair weather, but he would never put himself in harm's way for her. I betrayed the man who would die for me, for a bastard who doesn't care about me. Tears flowed from her eyes again. Meanwhile, in the guest cottage by the heated pool at Ed Simmons' house, Will and Ed were making final preparations. When Will looked around, he knew he had hired the right person. There was no doubt that Ed Simmons, the lawyer, was a master of his craft. On Sunday evening, he gathered another senior partner, two juniors, and a parallel partner to discuss strategy. Another thought that ran through Will's head was, "This is going to cost me a lot of money." This realization, however, made him smile. So much the less for a cheating bitch. Ed assured Will that both Ellie and Corey would understand the reality by tomorrow and would hire lawyers. He knew that the first shots would either be denials, easily refuted by the mountain of evidence they had already collected, or attempts to limit the damage and save face. He encouraged Will to continue his normal work schedule and be patient. "I doubt I'll have anything new until midweek, so go to work, keep a low profile, don't talk to strangers, and under no circumstances take candy from someone in a suspicious van." Simmons laughed loudly at his own joke, hugged Will tightly and said, "Don't worry, son. You are in the loving hands of Simmons and Wyckoff." Will wasn't sure if he could go home. He was afraid that Ellie was stubbornly sitting on his porch, waiting for an ambush with, "It's not what it seems. It didn't mean anything, just sex. Please, honey, I'm sure we can work this out. I only love you." Ed was 2 steps ahead of him. He was on his cell phone for a moment, then turned to his new favorite client and grinned. "One of my people just drove by and told her to leave the area because she was trespassing. She tried to be indignant like, 'I'm waiting here in my house for my husband.'" He laughed again. "My man suggested that if this was her house, she could enter with her key, after which she became furious. He pretended to call the police to report a potentially violent trespasser, speaking loud enough for her to hear him. She left quickly." Will smiled at this, but Ed noticed that it was a sad smile. "Stupid bitch," he thought. Over the next few days, Will did everything he was told, following the lawyer's advice to the letter. By Tuesday afternoon, he had changed his phone number because Ellie simply couldn't understand that he didn't want to talk to her. The situation in the office was difficult. Corey avoided him, working from home on the advice of his lawyer. "You don't want to appear pushy or leave the business as if admitting that your partner is right," was his advice. "Will value honesty." He told the small group that he and Corey had a disagreement that they were working out. For now, they should treat him like the partner that he is. He assured everyone that the problems would be short-lived and would be resolved soon. Whether he believed what he said or not was in question. Ellie continued to work at the stables, but was so distracted that her employer asked what was wrong. She explained that she and Will were having difficulties without going into detail. Her boss, Stephanie, hugged her and told her to hang in there. Ellie also had difficulty finding competent legal advice. Lawyers want to know the facts in advance. Since it was clear from her explanation that there was little chance of a significant payout, the first 2 lawyers dropped her case. She eventually turned to a personal injury lawyer named Seth Moore. He assured her that he had handled more difficult cases before and would get her a lot of money in the settlement. The unspoken wish was that she would have enough money to pay him a fee that would cover that month's rent, with some left over for an evening at his favorite nightclub. "Maybe if she's desperate enough in a few weeks, she'll sleep with me in exchange for favors rendered." Neither Seth Moore nor Corey's lawyer, James Abernathy, had much time on their side. Ed Simmons was a highly successful trial lawyer with an impeccable reputation. He was deeply involved with the authorities in the judicial corridors of Charlotte. He pushed hard for a speedy hearing after Ellie was served with a summons 2 days after she returned home. Abernathy was a tougher opponent than Allie's incompetent lawyer, but even he knew he wasn't holding a winning hand. He understood that dragging this case out for months or years was beyond his client's financial capabilities. By the end of the second week, he was advising his client to offer to sell his share of the business at a reduced price that would allow Corey time to get on his feet and pay his legal fees. Corey authorized Abernathy to make an offer to sell at a price of 80 cents on the dollar. Simmons received an offer to sell and advised Will to offer 10 cents on the dollar. Will probably end up somewhere around 30. I know Abernathy well, and although he sees the situation as it is, he will still be a tough negotiator. Will wanted Corey to feel his pain. 10 cents on the dollar would almost bring his former friend back to his financial starting point. That would be fair, but Will also knew he needed to listen to his lawyer. If they got 30 cents on the dollar, it would certainly put Corey in a difficult position. He will leave the rest to fate or to a later time, whichever comes first. 3 days later, true to his word, Ed made the deal on Will's behalf. 28 cents on the dollar. He told Will over the phone. Not as much as you hoped, but it's still a pretty big win for you. Will thanked him. Ed now addressed real pain. Will, you're going to need to sit down and talk to Ellie. The judge will want to know that you tried to connect and talk to her, even if your intention is divorce. Having answers to questions before the judge asks them is always the best way. We had Judge Kim Landis on our divorce case. It could be better, it could be worse, so it's okay. However, she has strict rules about trying to work things out, so she will have questions about counseling, perhaps even requesting it. I won't bore you with the details now, but I will say that it's time to talk. I'll arrange everything. We'll start with the lawyers in the room, but then I think it would be wise to just sit down and talk to her alone. Prove that you can have a calm and friendly conversation, even when you're in pain. It will help our case to show that you are a reasonable person. Will lowered his head, knowing Ed was right but dreading this moment. Okay, Ed, you are right. Arrange a meeting. Ed looked at his young client and felt sorry for him. Ed Simmons was also once young and his heart was broken by his first love. Ed paid for college with an Rock scholarship and served as a first lieutenant when the First Gulf War began. He served with the 1st Infantry Division, known as the Big Red One. He served under the command of Brigadier General Andrew S. Gainey, and they struck a major blow. However, at home, his love, Becky, decided not to wait for her man. Ed was devastated, but with the help of friends and family, he pulled through. He knew that Will would be okay in the long run. Honestly, he knew he would be better off without his cheating wife, but now was not the time for such a message. Will understand this in time. Now was the time to sit with him and let him know that he was not alone. Ed might be a tough son of a bitch, but he had a big heart and it ached for his client. The meeting was scheduled for noon the following Friday. Ed wanted Will to have the weekend to recover from a tough few hours. Both sides agreed that they would spend the first 30 minutes with their lawyers, and then Will and Ellie would have time alone. Ellie and Seth Moore arrived on time. Seth was wearing a suit off the rack, probably from JCPenney. Ellie was dressed in a modest light blue dress that reached to her knees and a burgundy sweater. Her hair was pulled back into a ponytail, and she wore Michael Kors glasses. Ed and Will stood up as they entered the most private conference room at Simmons and Wyckoff, which meant the other party had to walk through several lobbies and hallways. Ed wanted to make sure Moore appreciated what he was dealing with. He knew that Seth's office was 15 square feet, 3 chairs at a desk from IKEA, owned by his assistant/part-time dancer Molly when he could afford her payment. Will had always been fascinated by Ellie, and seeing her now brought a lump to his throat. Even with her betrayal, she was still beautiful in his eyes. He managed to smile politely, but avoided looking at her with any signs of affection. "It's good to see you, Will," she said, studying him carefully, perhaps trying to sense if he had any feelings in his heart for her. Will nodded. "Ellie, thanks for coming." Ed wore his poker face, but on the inside he was thinking, "Good job, guy, don't show her anything." "Shall we begin?" he said out loud, pointing to the chairs. "Yes, thank you," Seth responded quickly, perhaps thinking that he wanted to gain some momentum in his favor. "My client agreed to this meeting to find out what her husband was proposing to save their marriage." Ed interrupted him by pulling a 6-inch folder from the end of his desk. He moved it across the table to the opposite lawyer. "What is this?" asked his opponent. "I'm not sure we're ready to accept any documents today." "Lawyer, Ed began, wanting to get rid of this nonentity as quickly as possible. This is about 50% of our files showing adultery and betrayal of marriage vows on the part of your client. To avoid unnecessary repetition, we have not included anything that is repeated. You will find recordings and photographs of her adulterous sexual activity in Charleston, South Carolina, 3 weeks ago. In addition, we have witnesses from hotel staff throughout the region who will testify to seeing your client with her lover, Mr. Corey Parker, registering under false names as husband and wife. These meetings took place over a 6-month period. Our team of investigators was very thorough to make our statement clear. There is no ambiguity or rumor here, just cold, hard, verifiable data. Due to the graphic nature of the attached photographs, I encourage you to review them after this meeting has concluded. Ellie winced when she heard the description of the folder's contents. Knowing that this man had seen photographs of her lewd sexual encounters, she cringed. He smiled politely. Together under the moonlit sky, or lying side by side among candles and champagne, everything seemed so exotic and exciting. In the daylight, she began to recognize her choices as a betrayal of a kind and loving person. She tried to control herself. Ed slid the second folder across the table. It was much thinner, only 2 pages. Lawyer, this is my client's proposal to his wife for a divorce settlement. Then, looking directly at Ellie for full effect, he continued, Personally, I think the terms are more than generous. If it were me, I would prefer to present all this to the judge so that she can see the ugly truth of this deliberate betrayal on the part of Mrs. Benton. However, Mr. Benton, being a man of honor, persuaded me to make this proposal instead. His experience and knowledge of legal maneuvers paid off. Ellie looked defeated, and more was clearly out of place. Ed knew they wouldn't reach an agreement today. The initial hearing is scheduled in 2 weeks, and there was always some bargaining before meeting the judge. Will's proposal was harsh considering the circumstances, but more than fair considering his wife's betrayal of his love and trust. Will offered a lump sum payment of $75,000 in exchange for Ellie agreeing that he would become the sole owner of the company, now and forever. She must agree to waive any future claims. She and Will split the proceeds from the sale of the house. Ellie will keep the car, but she will have to start paying her own dues a month after the divorce. Ellie can take any furniture in the house, except their wedding bed and the antique set of rocking chairs that Will's grandmother gave them at their wedding. Ellie will keep any jewelry Will bought, except for the engagement and wedding rings. They must be returned no later than the day the divorce decree is rendered. Ellie must agree that the reason for the divorce is her adultery. There was an explainer section that detailed the agreement, but the main points were simple and straightforward. My client and I will review this offer and get back to you with our counter offer early next week. Moore responded, trying to sound like his client was holding the moral high ground. However, I can say that Mrs. Benton will not agree to her husband's demand for the return of the rings. Simmons was seething inside at the impudence of this idiot, but as always, he showed nothing on his face. However, he was leaning over the table when he spoke again. Seth, you and I both know that your client has repeatedly and willfully violated her marriage vows to Corey Parker. She did this with full knowledge that her actions could destroy my client's emotional well-being as well as his ability to continue his business with his partner. That's why they set up a huge cover-up to keep my client in the dark. Her behavior was cruel and callous. If you want to act this out in front of Judge Landis, you're welcome. I would welcome the opportunity to fight you in her courtroom. I'll be honest, lawyer, you have no business. Your client cheated and lied. We have a mountain of evidence, and we won't take any pleasure in it. But we will make it all public at trial if you try to cause more harm to my client than he has already suffered. If I do not hear from you by Tuesday afternoon, the offer will be rescinded. Then I'll see you in court. Moore huffed and puffed, but even his low-level lawyer knew that his opponent held all the cards. This settlement would be a good income for him. He would have received $10,000 before taxes, which was more than he usually earned in 2 months. If there's nothing else to discuss, Simmons said, standing up and buttoning his jacket, I think we should give the Bentons some time to talk privately. Moore stood up and extended his hand to Ed. We will contact you, he said. Ed shook hands and immediately headed to the men's room to wash his hands. Will and Ellie are left alone. Ed advised his client not to speak first under any circumstances. As the aggrieved party, through his silence, he should have insisted that his soon-to-be ex-wife speak first. There was a moment of awkward silence after the door closed behind the departing lawyers. Will looked at Ellie. Ellie looked at the floor. Finally, she spoke. I have no excuses, Will. If I could return everything, I would return it. My behavior has caused great harm to you, and I will carry this with me for the rest of my life. Saying I'm sorry or that it meant nothing, just sex, would be even more disrespectful. But I want you to know how destroyed I am thinking about how badly I treated you. Believe what you want, Ellie, it doesn't matter to me, was all Will said. She continued, Is there hope for us, Will? Do you think we could get through this with counseling? I don't want a divorce. I never wanted to. I'll do whatever you ask. I just want us to be together. Will tried his best not to explode. She wanted to eat the fish and climb the tree, and all this at his expense. Ellie, if the court requires counseling, I will go. This brought a glimmer of hope in her deceitful eyes. But know that I don't want to be with you ever again. I loved you. I gave you my heart, mind, and soul. You repaid me by sleeping with my ex-best friend. I don't even know who you are, Ellie, other than an easy girl. I will never touch you again, and there is no way I will have children with you. You want my forgiveness, but you ruined any hope of it when you happily and often spread your legs for Corey. Ellie turned pale at his words. Will, do you hate me that much? Yes, Ellie, today I hate you. The fact that you asked this question shows your true colors. You only think about yourself. But I plan ahead, and my goal is to get rid of any feelings for you as soon as possible. My goal is not to think about you at all. You're not worth the pain. I spent thousands of kisses and years of my life on you. I trusted you, Ellie, with everything, and you took everything. You will settle on your feet or on your back as you need, but none of this will be connected with me. You will have your horses and your stallion. That should be enough for you. Ellie tried a couple more tactics. Unlimited sex, never seeing Corey again, seeing a therapist to figure out why she made the choices she did. All this went over Will's ears. Half an hour later, the conversation ended. Will you walk me to the car? Last moment together, she finished. Go on your own, Ellie, or call Corey and ask him to pick you up and get back into bed with him. I finished. Will stood up and started to walk away, but turned to her with one last comment. We had everything, Ellie, and you blew it. I'll give Corey credit. He must be a great lover. Over the next few days, Seth Moore, the lawyer, tried his best to get Simmons to concede some points in the divorce suit. It was like talking to the wall in your office, just as useful. After the second conversation, Simmons stopped answering his calls. The Tuesday deadline was approaching, and Ellie knew there was little chance of her getting more than what Will was offering. Corey finally called her on Monday and suggested they meet to console each other. Ellie, desperate for any kind of affection, agreed to meet him at his condominium. She arrived at 8 p.m. and stayed the night. They had sex several times. Corey treated Ellie like her personal bitch, and Ellie allowed it. It was pathetic, but it was her choice. Simmons stationed one of his men outside Corey's condominium, and he recorded her comings and goings. When she left in the morning, it was clear that she had been greatly taken advantage of. Her mascara and lipstick were smudged, and she looked like a cheap bitch walking away from her client. The investigator chuckled and turned the evidence over to Simmons, and Wyckoff. Later that morning, as Ed was reviewing it with one of his assistants, he muttered, "Nobody could be that stupid." When Ellie returned to her studio apartment, which she had been renting month after month, she called Moore and told him to accept the divorce petition without modification. He tried to argue with her, but she hung up. The day of the first hearing arrived. Judge Landis was as strict as people said she was. She explored both sides of the case, asking leading questions. Moore looked like a man in a sinking life raft with sharks circling around him. Despair was the only suitable word to describe his case. Simmons was also under scrutiny, but he was impeccably prepared. He gave plenty of answers before they were asked, and when asked, he had more than enough evidence. Landis also asked the couple a lot of questions. Will was expertly prepared. Ellie not so much. At the end of the hearing, Judge Landis said, "Well, the evidence in this case seems overwhelming. There are usually two sides to every difficult marriage, but for God's sake, Mrs. Benton, I don't see any good reason why you left your husband for Mr. Parker. As far as I understand, the above sold his share of the business for next to nothing, confirming my opinion. I usually schedule counseling, but I believe that Mrs. Benton's cruel betrayal makes any reconciliation impossible. Mrs. Benton, I can only urge you to carefully reconsider your life choices in an attempt to live your best life on your own. Mr. Benton's claim for divorce, and its terms are granted. The marriage is dissolved. The meeting is closed." There were no joyful hugs or applause from Will. Will and Ed shook hands discreetly. Seth Moore quickly retreated, leaving his client sitting at the table. Ellie stood up and walked out of the courtroom completely alone. Will began his new life alone, in pain, but knowing that he was not alone. 5 months after settling his divorce, Corey was leaving his condominium when he apparently slipped and fell down 3 floors of stairs. He spent 3 weeks in the hospital. At the time of the accident, his blood alcohol level was 0.15, almost twice the legal limit. He didn't remember the incident. His insurance expired while he was looking for a new job. His hospital bills consumed all his savings. Will learned of the fall while on a trip to Smoky Mountain National Park. He smiled, thinking, couldn't happen to a better guy. The police investigated and discovered that Corey had a visitor, Miss Ellie Shriver, earlier that evening. Following obvious evidence, detectives found out that they were lovers, but Corey had another relationship on the side. Ellie was found guilty of felony assault and sentenced to 3 years in prison. This was not a pleasant experience. To this day, Corey walks with a noticeable limp. He works in technical support for a local college. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.